Hey everybody, hope you're doing well today. So every year around Halloween type time here in the US, I make a horror piece. And this was the one from this year. It is a zombie warrior that I made. And I had somebody ask me about, did you record a video while you were making this? The answer is no, I didn't, mainly because this was hours upon hours of me piddling and playing around and getting the look that I wanted. So I didn't. I used a couple different things to do this. So I used Photoshop and I used ArtRage. And it's a little bit of photo bashing, a little bit of freehand drawing, so it's a kind of a combo of a bunch of different things and techniques while I was doing it. And so I thought, well, I want to show you guys how to do some of this and how you can play around with it. But I also thought, not everybody has Photoshop. Not everybody has the time to learn that and mess around with it. I use Photoshop a lot here more recently to get a feel for what I want a painting to look like. This one I did an even deeper dive because I really wanted to play around and push some of my skills in that arena as well. But, what if you didn't have Photoshop? Could you recreate this in ArtRage? And the answer is yes, you can. So I wanted to show you some ideas and some ways that you can possibly do some of this. So I thought I'd break down some of the different elements and show you ways to get a similar type look if you just have ArtRage. Okay, so that way you can get a feel for it and use it. And really, when it comes down to it, it's not necessarily the program. It's just your time and effort of practicing and doing it. So let's go over that, and I'll show you some of the different things and some of the different elements. So I'm going to move this off screen, and that way I can kind of have it up here to look at, and we can discuss some different things. So one of the first things would probably be that helmet and metal, because that's kind of the domineering thing, but also the face and how you do that. So let's kind of start with, let's start with the helmet, and then I'll back up and show you some of the different things as far as like how to, if you were going to lay this out in ArtRage, how would I start it? And go from there. So I'm going to go to the selection tool here. I'm going to go just pick the round and pull it out here, push shift to keep a circle. And I'm just going to make this circle here. Then I'm going to go over here to the custom brush, and I've got my watercolor brush number 4. I do use my custom brushes in this because it gets a good effect, and that's part of why I created these to do this. So I'm going to grab a kind of a neutral bluish gray and just kind of start laying this in. And I'm just going to make a sphere. And you can see how this really overlays and gives you kind of an interesting modeled look just doing it. So this is how, if you've seen my video on creating that wolf with a moon, this is a similar kind of concept. Okay. So I've got that laid in there. I could come back and lay some other color over top if I wanted and give kind of some blues and things like that on there. I could even go across the opposite to the color wheel here and get a really light orange and maybe throw that in over here as well. So I've got this kind of interesting modeled mishmash of colors. That's a perfect place to start for doing something like this helmet. So you can kind of see where some of that was dropped in here and how I did that part around here. Well, how do I get this part and make this look more like metal, more like a hammered steel? So there's a couple different ways you could do it. One is you could do this right here, and then you could come in with the brush. There's one of my watercolor brushes is an overlay brush. An overlay is always used to put in the highlights. And so I could use that one and, oops, sorry, I'm hitting the wrong button here. Bring it down in size, and then just kind of start laying in where I want that reflection to be. Okay. And so it gives me really kind of a nice modeled area for that. I have another one that is darken. I can come back to darken, and let's say if I want to go with kind of a darker look here, I can also add another layer if I want to. So like if I add another layer, I could change the blend mode to multiply and then add in some of that darkness and really kind of push it on the edges. So see how that kind of gives you this interesting metallic look just because you've got these different colors quickly splotched in there like that. So that's how I get these kind of looks for a lot of these things. Now the other thing I'll do if I want a kind of more of a metallic hammered metal is I'll go to my palette knife. I'll get the frost or the frosted spots and sometimes the tiny frost. And then I'll bring the size up a little bit, and I need to merge this down. So let me just merge that layer down. And I can go over it and just kind of randomly hit it here and there and soften some of this. And that will give me that pitted metal kind of look. Okay. And like that. Now, if I wanted it to be more of a hammered look, like a hammered metal, then I can even go with this one like this and do that. I can come back over it and hit it with the tiny frost again and really kind of break that up and build those textures on top of each other. All right. And then from there, I can go back and use that watercolor brush to add those same splotches back in and so forth. But you can see how you get this look really quick. And then from there, once I get this how I like it, it's just a matter of if I want to take, like, for example, the pen tool, and let's say I wanted to have some cracks in here. So I go with a darker color and just kind of draw in where I want the crack. Then I'm going to go with the lighter color. I'm kind of sitting far back. So my light's coming from that direct from the upper left here. So I want to just kind of go along and add in some highlights to the crack like so. Okay, and so that's how if I wanted to get a nice, crack spot on the helm or on the metal or something like that, that's how you add that. It's just that simple. And you can add that in. Now, I do recommend if you're doing this, add a new layer above it so that way if you didn't like it, you're not destroying this layer. You could just erase it or push it back or whatever. But then work on the layers. And then once you've got this kind of how you want it, the last thing that I would do is, for like if I was doing this zombie, is I took a little bit of this reddish color and then I went back to my watercolor brush and just used brush number 4, bring it up a little bit, and kind of splotched in some blood. I forgot I actually did this on a separate layer, like so. I can change the blend mode, for example, if I want to do multiply, lower down the opacity a little bit, and I got kind of that rusty, yucky kind of look. You can also do Shift-Alt Control T, and if I wanted to change the placement of it, like say I wanted it a little bit more down here, like so, stretch it and make it kind of more splotchy, and then just save it, and then Control Alt down arrow, and I have everything on one layer. And then if I wanted to do, now I recommend, for example, if you're doing these, like do this on one layer, okay, add in the colors, and then you can go back and add in any of these shadows or highlights by selecting that layer or locking the transparency of that layer, okay, and that gives you the chance to really go back in and play with all these. But that's how this was done, okay. Now you get that kind of a look. If you want stuff like this right here, like these little rivets and that kind of stuff, that's really just the same process, but done on a smaller scale, okay, for the rivets. So if this was smaller, then, like, for example, let me duplicate this layer. Okay, do Control-Alt-Shift-T. Oops, helps to make it uniform. And now I have a rivet. Okay. From there, you can also go to layer, oops, let me get rid of this, layer effects, go to shadow, activate it, and change the offset just slightly. Move your stuff around. And now you have a rivet sitting on top of it because it's got a cast shadow and stuff. So that's the easy way to do it. You could also use the airbrush and do the same thing. Okay, so that's how you would do the rivet. The other ones that I had here, like for example, I have those little indentations. Similar thing, you can make a new layer and just go along and put in the spots and dots like I did. So for example, if you grab a round and smooth brush, you can just do like so and make those spots. Okay, if you do those on another layer, like for example, if I went boom, 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 like that, then I can lock the transparency. I can grab my airbrush if I want to real quick. And I can airbrush just slightly on some of these to make them look like they've got a little bit of dimension, and then go in and draw, you know, on the edge there to give some highlighting like I did on the crack here. So like for example, if I just went back to the pen tool here, I'm using my bracket keys to change the size. So I can just, oops, I forgot this one's, I've got the smoothing turned up because I changed brushes. The key is just pay attention to where your light is. Indentations. Okay, so that's how you get that kind of a look with all of that. So let me do Control A, delete, and just flatten all this real quick, and delete. Okay, so that's how you do the metal for like the helm. All right, so if you wanted to draw it, the way that I draw it is I go to Paint Symmetry, and go back. I don't know why it doesn't give you the option to do this here. Like even right-clicking on it, you'd think it would give you the option to change and edit the tool, but it doesn't. So you come back here and set number of segments, change it to 2. Okay, and now I've got that. So now if I want to do this, his visor and his helm, like say for example I wanted to lay out the helm, all I have to do is take like my pen tool, my pencil tool. I usually do this fairly loose when I'm doing it, but I just draw out how I want it to look, like so. Doing this really loose. I need to readjust my chair. I'm sitting way too far back to do this. Let me zoom out. Okay, so for example, if I was drawing this, like so, like so, like so, and obviously I'm doing this really quick, so I'm not trying to recreate, but it gives you the idea of how I have it. And then if I wanted to draw him, I can just draw him and get kind of an idea for where I want his face, mustache, and so forth. But you get the idea. So this is how I usually draw this out for a front on, and kind of get the idea. This works great for portraits and stuff. Like so. And then once I've got it drawn out, I can go in and refine it. But that's how I lay out for the helm. For something I have that's symmetrical, like this helm, that's how I get the symmetry for it. Okay. So let me undo this real quick. But again, it's just you know, if you're sketching it out, the easiest thing is just to kind of take and do it, you know, versus like how I was just doing it. So that you really get more of a controlled. And I've got another one that I did on YouTube that you can see that's got where I do some of this and really go into detail on drawing the face and how I do it all there. So, and that was, if I remember right, that was actually before the paint symmetry. So this kind of made it a little bit easier to get stuff symmetrical. But this is a great way to really, when you've got that front on view, to get stuff how you like it, and then from there you can start kind of darkening it in and tweaking it and really adding in the details for what you want. Okay, so that's how I would lay out the and the helm and anything symmetrical that's straight on looking. Okay, now this. Get the canvas back up. Excuse me. So now one of the other things is that chainmail. So how do you make chainmail? Well, if you go to your sticker tools, you have this rainbow. So you have a lot of different ones, okay? And let me presets back down here. So you've got chain, you've got cable, you've got all these different ones, right? But if you come down here under fun brushes, you'll see one that's called Rainbow Spring. I'm just going to select this back to how it was. So I can do that. So if you do it, you can select different colors and it gives you these rings. Okay. And the more you hold it down, the more it just keeps building up the rings. All right. But these are a great place to start for that, but you need to make a few variations. So click on spray variation. Offset, we want to drop that down to about -2 or so. Rotation, you can even, you can leave that there too, but I sometimes will take the pin pressure off and do it that way, but this one is the biggest one you want to do, is that offset. Okay, so by doing that, you saw how before they were kind of all over the place, but by removing that, it keeps them fairly straight line, but not a perfectly straight line. Even if it's if I hold control and draw a straight line, they're still a little closer, a little further. It's just the variation. You can adjust all of that in spray variation, but I want it like this for now. Okay. So then what I do is I select a little bit darker color. I also recommend that you start this with a darker background. Okay. So let me go a little darker. There we go. All right. So then I'm going to come up in value just slightly. And go back S for sticker tool. So now I have these rings started. And so if I want, like for example, how that's coming down the side, the easiest thing honestly to do first is to kind of draw in the direction that you want and where any folds might be, like so. Okay, then come back to sticker and start following, and I'm keeping the same amount of pen pressure, my pen, as I go. You can actually do this with the mouse. Okay, so there's that. Then I come a little bit lighter and I think about where would the light spots be. Okay, well maybe there's some here. Like so. I can come a little bit lighter, like so. And so this really builds the texture, and then you can take your airbrush and select a little bit darker. So that's not bad. You can go to multiply and kind of push some of these back into shadow, like so. And so that's how you can build your chainmail. And I'm doing this really fast, so obviously I would take my time and, you know, do this much more evenly, okay? But that's an easy, quick way to build chainmail and to get that kind of a look. And then just really it's a matter of just kind of going across the direction that you're, you know, if it's a shoulder or whatever. And so for chainmail, you've got usually a couple different patterns. One of the most common is a 4 rings on a center ring. And so if you kind of keep that in mind, you can actually very methodically build it up to get that nice overlapping, like so. And that's kind of how I tend to build it out. Or I've gotten to where I can take and draw it out and then kind of reposition so that I start building it, like so. So if I'm building like an Aventel or something like that, then I can just kind of build it out this way quickly. All right. Now, again, one of the other things you can do is if you have Photoshop or if you have stock images, you can find stock images of chainmail and use that. But if you don't and you want to be able to paint it, this is a very good way to do it, you know. And it just makes it super easy. Even if you're just trying to rough out a concept quickly, that's a great way to do it. Okay. So that is chainmail. Now the other thing that I have here, it would be his beard and the arrows. But the arrows are really probably the main thing. So let me go to here. So the way the arrows are built, oops, helps to grab the right one. So the rectangle. So you draw a straight line, you can go to your fill bucket, go to the dark, fill that in, and you come back to your custom brush and then go to artistic, and these hair strands are good ones. If you have my brush pack, I actually have a wood brush in there. Go a little bit darker. Control, streak those across. Actually, I can bring that brush size down. So go a little bit lighter. Okay. All right, and that gives you a nice wood grain. You can change it around if you need to put a knock on the end of this. Then the easiest thing is just go back to your selection tool, and you can be as accurate or not with this. It doesn't really matter. Get my fill bucket again. Go to a darker one, like so. I'm going to change the size of that just a little bit. And again, this is where, oops, where you can be as accurate or whatever. You can come down here and kind of take, if you're trying to make kind of a medieval looking arrow and just give it kind of a, like if they would have had it wrapped on here, you can do that. This is still that same strands brush, like so. I can grab my chalk, fill this in real quick. Control D. So there's the shaft. I'm not worried about making an arrowhead because it's going to be embedded in him. So I'll make a new layer. Come back to your selections. Go with this one right here, which is the polygon selection. And looking at my arrow, I'm going to just make a quick fletching like so. And then go back to my Same hair strands. I'm going to go to the blue and just quickly paint in and fill in this area, trying not to twist it and turn it like I just did there so much. Now mine, I have a little bit of a change in color, so I can do that. Okay, so now I have that there. I'm going to do Control C, Control V, which pastes it on a new layer. I'm going to flip it upside down. And I'm going to like so. So now Control D. So I'm going to bring this one down with the other one. So Control Alt down arrow. And now I have these feathers on a layer and I have the shaft on a layer. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to E, to my eraser, and bring the size down. So brackets, left bracket shrinks it, right bracket increases it, and I'm going to just erase that really hard edge. Now if you want an arrow that's not been beat up like mine is in the picture, you just repeat this. And you could do this and then flip it, but I don't want it to be an exact mirror, so I'm going to do this by hand instead. So now there is a nice fletching on the arrow. Looks good. In mine, the arrows, I want them to look like they've been on his body for a while, like they've been torn up in just everything. So I'm going to make them look like that, and I'm going to add this little wrap right here as well. So the little wrap is just like we did this other one down here. So I can just grab this. I can even grab this and just select that, put it on a new layer just because. Go back to my strands, grab this darker color, just kind of crisscross it, lighter color. So now it looks like it's tied on there. Okay. And now for this, I'm going to go back to this one right here. I'm going to take my eraser and I want to distress this. One thing I would do that I just forgot to mention right now. So when I was doing this originally, I made this arrow, flattened it, copied the whole thing to another one, and then I just took and placed it on there. And so I did one, placed it, had made a copy of it, transformed it, turned it, placed it, and then I went in and erased out the feathers. Okay, so that's what I would do, but you know, since I'm not going to make a copy of this, so then I just went in and lightly erased and just really letting the pen pressure from my hand take what it wants and leave what it wants. And that's how I got this chewed up looking fletchings on my arrows, like so. And then from there, so let me merge all this down real quick. And then from there, it's just a matter of lock your transparency. Take your custom brush, and again, I'm going to go back to my watercolor ones. And there is the dark for using, but I can just use my regular one and select this dark bluish color. And then this is where I would add in some extra shadows and weathering kind of stuff. And you can even grab back to the overlay one. Interesting weathered dirty look, but you know, you get the idea. You can just sit here and play around with it till you get the look that you want, for as dirty as you want it to be. But that's how you do the arrow. Okay, so that's the arrow, the chainmail, the helm, laying out the person, the background itself. So let me get rid of this. The background itself was using these watercolor brushes, and so what I did was I just kind of splotched in the color, went a little bit larger. And so, for example, I was using blue. Oh, sorry, I got transparency lock still. I was like, why do I have transparency? So I splotched in the colors like that. Okay. And I would also add another layer, and this is where I would play around with blend modes and just, like, for example, like color dodge, and play around with using the different ones like that. And then I would make another layer and then add multiply and all that kind of stuff. And so that's another reason why I didn't make a video on this, because it was just me messing around. But by sitting here throwing these around like this, and then I would erase and take some away, but that's how I got all this look for all that. Okay, and then this right here, this like red streaks was another layer, the bottom, and then I went to artistic, and you can use the bristle brushes here for this. You can use any of these really, but to get kind of a similar look. And then just grabbed a red kind of color, bring this down a little bit, control, and just streak it in. And then you can also set this to erase mode and go back. And that's how you get this kind of a look for that. Okay, so that's how you do all the elements to get kind of the stuff. And as you can see, it really was me playing around with it. So that's why I didn't make a full video of me making that. And again, like I said, for some of it, I did photo bash some of it from some elements that I downloaded from a stock photo site that I have a membership to. And really that was just to save time, because I can sit here and paint all of this stuff and do all that stuff. But it's like, well, I wanted to play around with it. I wanted to mess around with it. And then once I got some of the stuff I liked, then I went back in, colored it, painted it, you know, and messed with it really here in ArtRage, because I like messing around and painting more here in ArtRage than I do in Photoshop. And I know there's a ton of people that paint in Photoshop. I just personally like the way that ArtRage feels for when I paint. So that's how I did that. Anyway, hopefully this helps. It shows you how you can make some of these assets and how you can use some of these different things to play around with it. You know, stuff like the sticker tools, use that, stencils, the selection tool, and all that kind of stuff to build up your different look in your layer. Try the paint symmetry tool out if you haven't messed with it. It's a great way if you like to do mandalas. It's a fantastic way to do it. I do have I made a line drawing of my zombie warrior, so I'm going to put that in the members area on Patreon, and that way it's all there as well. So yeah, put any questions or anything in the comments and let me know, and I'll get it answered. But I hope this really helps. Thanks for watching.